Hi, welcome to Rest Assured tutorial. This is the very first lecture, and before directly jumping to the Rest Assured tool, we should know about some basic terms, right? Like what is a web service or an API, where do we use it, right? About the XML, JSON, REST protocols, REST architecture and the SOAP protocol, right? So about all of these, I'll talk about within this session. So first, let's just try to understand that what is an API. Okay, so to make you understand this, I made an illustration. I'll just show you. Okay, so just think about any booking website, right? Its booking engine is nothing but any booking website, where you can book hotels, where you can book flights, right? So what usually happens on these websites or applications is that multiple users came with different type of requirements, right? Like some wants to book flight, some wants to book a hotel, right? Still this website is able to serve all these customers. Okay, so we'll just try to understand that how on the back end these kind of application or websites works, right? Suppose that there is this user one who came to this website and wants to book a flight from, let's say, New Delhi to New York, right? And whatever the information that you're seeing on the left hand side is already present on that website, and whatever is on the right side, users enters that, right? So he wants to travel from New Delhi to New York on this particular date with this number of passengers, right? Now what this website is going to do, it will send this information to different vendors. Okay, the same information it will send to different vendors. Now don't get confused, these vendors are different airlines, right? Do not get confused by the name vendor. These are just different airlines. Okay, so this information is went to these different websites. Now out of these four vendors or the airline websites, whatever which one has the availability for this flight on this particular date with this number of passenger will send back some information, right? Suppose vendor 2 has availability, so it will send back some information. Also, let's say vendor 4 has the availability, so also send back an information, and that will look like this, right? With all the details that the user entered, and there's an extra information like the price, right? How much it's going to cost, right? So this typical scenario is possible due to web services or the underlying API. Two websites that can be written in totally different languages, like it can be in PHP, the websites can be in .NET, right? Still they are able to communicate, right? This is the work of the underlying API. And the information that went from the this booking engine to these vendors is known as the request, right? So this information that went to these vendors is the request. Okay, and what we received against that request is the response. So vendor 2 and the vendor 4 send back us a response. Okay, so this is a very basic example. Even if I show you, like, accept this illustration, if I show you open some website, let's say we'll open a website called makemytrip.com. It just works like that. So you have to enter the information right from where you want to travel. Let's say you want to travel to New York City on this particular date with, let's say, 6 number of passengers. If I click on search, it's a one-way trip. I'll see response from different airline websites, like this is the Air India, this is Etihad, this is Virgin Atlantic, right? Cathay Pacific. So all the information I'm getting, and also I'm in that I'm getting the price of it, right? So we Make My Trip send a request to all of these airline websites, and whatever the website whatever the airline has the availability for that flight detail, send back a response, right? So this is how it's working. And more precisely, what happens is that all these websites shared their API with the Make My Trip, right? So Make My Trip can make an API call and fetches the information that the user wants from the other website. Okay, now this is fine, that this is how an API looks like, this is how it works, right? Now you must be thinking that why do we use these web services or APIs? So, first thing that comes to our mind by seeing this scenario is that simplicity, how simple it is. Like if these APIs were not present at the back end and you want to book a flight, you will go to individually each of these websites, check out the details and all. So it will be really fuzzy for the user, right? Also, it's much more convenient and efficient. Like on the same website, if I take an example, like earlier, if we have to sign up on a website, we have to enter all the informations, like our phone number, password, right? But if you have already created an account with Google, or let's say with the Facebook, you don't have to enter it again. You can simply log in with your Google account to this particular website or with your Facebook account. Again, this is possible due to APIs, because Google shared their login API with this website Make My Trip. Facebook shared its API, login API with this Make My Trip. Right, so these APIs make work a lot simpler than it used to be. Right. Now next we have to see that how we test these web services. So before going to the testing part, I just want to tell you about one more thing. I'll talk about little more depth, how this APIs are actually working, because you must be getting some questions in your mind. Like I just said, I remember that there are two systems, right? Like the two websites that can be in totally different languages. Suppose these are two applications, like one is this Java application and another is the PHP application, right? And they want to communicate. Fine, that via the API they can communicate, but how we'll actually create that API, what things we'll keep in mind, right? Whether there are some protocols or any architecture to follow, right? When a developer creates API, it has to keep these things in mind. So whenever an API is formed, two things are kept in mind, that it should have the systematic flow as well as the secure flow. Let's talk about the systematic flow first. So why we actually need a systematic flow is because these two applications are in totally different languages. If they try to communicate, they should able to understand one's request and then send back a response, right? So that's why the format, the request is getting formed, the response is generated, should be same. So that's where your SOAP as well as the REST protocols comes into play, right? Like if I'm creating an API, following the SOAP protocol, then my request will be in the format of XML, my response will be in the format of XML, right? I'll come back to the XML. I'll tell you that how an XML request and response looks like, but I'm just talking about right now about this protocol called SOAP protocol. Same way, if I want to create my let's say request and response in the form of JSON, then I'll follow the REST architecture. And currently, in the market, 90% of APIs are REST based. Reason behind that is the JSON. REST uses JSON, while SOAP is just limited to the XMLs. Okay, you'll get yourself. I'll show you how an XML looks like, how a JSON request response looks like. From that you'll get it that why JSON is much more in demand. Also, reason behind that the SOAP protocol is not much in use, because it's quite old, and as its name suggests, it's a protocol. So there are some set of defined rules that you have to follow. Whereas in the REST is an architecture, it much more flexible than that. There's still some set of rules, but like SOAP, it's much more flexible. Your REST based APIs, right? So the REST is much more in demand these days. Okay, so now okay, this is about systematic flow, that this protocols has been used, REST and the SOAP used. Also, to maintain the secure flow is important. I'll tell you that what secure flows is all about. So these APIs are not just limited to login on a website or booking, right? But bank sectors also uses these APIs, right? So it's required that the request that is going, response that is generated, should be encrypted. There can be some critical user information that getting passed. Just think about it, that these are two banks, right? Not Java, PHP applications, two banks that are communicating, right? So a transaction is happening, a critical user information is going to the other application, right? So it should be encrypted. So that's why again these protocols of the architectures used, because it makes this transmission much more secure. Okay, so these are the two things that developer keep in mind while creating this API, and this is a little bit about the back end working, how and why these APIs are created. Now let's just talk about this XML and the JSON and why REST is much more popular. I gave you an introduction, but we'll see a practical scenario. Okay, so I'll talk about this same example again. So this request that we have built here will build the same request in the form of XML. Suppose we are making this API, right, and we are following the SOAP protocol. Then we have to use the XML. So let's see how that request is going to look like in the XML format. Okay, so here I got it. So this is the request XML. Okay, so you see, this is the request XML on front end. It looks like this: New Delhi NYC September 16, number of passengers 6, right? But if I right click over here and click on the view page source, this is how actually an XML looks like, right? So within XML you have to use a lot of tags, right? Some are unnecessary, but still this is how XML works. And every tag that started it has to end, right? Like this head is started, it's ending. The body is started, it's ending. Your main contents resides inside this body tag, right? And whatever the information that you're passing comes in the form of tag. So like my request was like this is the information that user has to enter, like from it has to travel to date passenger. So all these are the tags, right? From your information goes in and the tag closes. Same goes for the other. To your information and then the tag is closing, right? So this is how a typical XML based request looks like, right? And for the same request we'll get response, just the similar kind of response. If I'll open that also, okay, let's see, and click on view page source, right? So this is how it looks like. Okay, the same information with an extra tag called price, right? This was our response, right? So this is how a work is done, how a request is formed in the case of SOAP. Now if I show you the same example, suppose we are following the REST architecture, right? We are building our requests in JSON. XML is possible, but that's a very rare scenario, right? Because JSON is the main reason that why we are using the REST. So the same request, how it's going to look like in the JSON. So you will be surprised to see, like within the JSON we do not have to use these tags and all, right? We can directly pass our information. It's just like native English, not actually English, but it's much more understandable, right, than these tags. Okay, so if I'll show you this JSON, this is how it looks like. Simple as that, right? So with this curly brace your request starts, with curly brace your request offs, and all your information is in the form of key and value pair. So whatever the information that you're seeing on the left hand side is your key, and the information that is on your right side is its value, right? So there are no extra tags, starting, closing, nothing, only the user information plain as it is, right? So you can judge it yourself, how easier it to write the request in the form of JSON than REST. So that's why all this Facebook, Walmart and Twitter APIs on the back end uses the JSON. It's in the trending. That's why how simpler and easier to use than to use different tags and the repetitive information again and again, right? So it's a very basic example, from it will give clarity, but again in the coming lectures also we'll see some more practical examples that will make us clear about the differences. Okay, so this is how your JSON or the XML request response looks like. Now let's move forward. That okay, I'll tell you about all the basic stuff, but now I want to tell you about something like why we need to test these web services. So what happens is that when this response comes, right, okay, that that's fine that we got the response, right? But we have to check the information in the response, right? Like it can be the response is not correct, it can be corrupted, right? There is some information that should not be there. So all those things, that whether the API calls are working fine or not, whether the request is going in the right format or not. To check, all these stuffs, we have to test it. We have to test our API, whether it's working, according the way it should work or not. Okay, so that's why we need all these tools like the rest assured. Okay, but rest assured is not a standalone tool in the market. Before rest assured, there has been SOAP UI. Still, it's there. There's this postman. So, what is the? I'll come to the postman later, but first I'll talk about SOAP UI. So, SOAP UI was a tool, that was vastly used by the industry, to test these web services, SOAP based, REST based. But what the problem with the SOAP UI was is that, there were two versions of the SOAP UI present. Right, there is this one version called SOAP UI free version, and another version is the SOAP UI Pro version. Okay, so I'll just open the website. I'll show you. You see here we have the SOAP UI Pro as well as we have the free version. So within the free version, you see, we can't really automate our test. We can just manually send the request. Via the automation, I mean, we can't really can write the code and write a script and all that kind of stuff. We can't really do that. For that, for the automation, we have to buy this Pro version, right, which has some monthly fee. But what benefit we are getting out of rest assured, it's that it's completely open source, right? You don't have to pay anything. It's just simple and very powerful Java libraries that you can get inside the Eclipse and start working with your project. Except the SOAP UI that you have to brought in license, then use it. Even with the free version, there are some way around using which you can automate it by running those test cases in Eclipse. But there is lots of work that it's required with the free version, right? But with the rest assured, if you you're familiar with the Java, you have basic Java knowledge, okay, just very basic of programming and all, you can very easily go and automate your test, right? It has some very powerful libraries present in the rest assured framework, right? So that's why rest assured is trending and people are using it. Okay, so next, this is about rest assured and the SOAP UI, the basic difference among these. Next, I'll tell you like when we'll start our testing scenarios, we should have some handy APIs with us. So luckily we have so many APIs present with us, like the student app, retail app, right? These are the standalone apps that will install locally on our system, right? Right now we'll start with the student app only. It's a very basic application. Then we'll move forward with the retail app, which is much more advanced than that. So these are the two standalone applications that we are going to work with. These are the full-fledged APIs, right? In the form of JSON, full-fledged APIs, and we'll install it locally on our system. So it's not going to be on the internet somewhere like an already existing application. These are the applications that are designed by us, developed by us from the scratch, these APIs, right? And these are sufficient for us to learn all the features of rest assured. Apart from these, we'll talk about the Facebook API as well as the Twitter API, PayPal API, right, and the Walmart API. All about these, the API that trending ones. We'll see, how we can send send a request through rest assured or receive a response, validate a response. All of these we are going to see, in the coming sessions. So this is about this session. In the next session, we are going to start with the manual testing part, right? How we can manually test a web service, how we can manually test a web service, and for that we are going to use Postman. So before next lecture, I'll show you that how you can install the Postman. So on the Google, you just simply have to search for the Postman, and there will be an official website, getpostman.com, right? On this website, just click on the download app, download it for the Windows or the Mac, whatever you're using, okay, and get it ready. In the next session, I'll begin with I'll show you that how we can send a request, get a backend response, and that too we are going to do with the student app. Okay, so about student app is nothing. It's very simple. I'll show you that it's just a simple jar file that you have to run in the backend with the command promote. Below in the description, I will show you, I will provide you the link of the student app so you can download it and keep it handy. So all you have to do now is install the Postman, get the student app ready. In the next session we are going to perform some manual testing using the Postman on the student app. Before moving to the automation and the rest assured part, we should see the basics, right? How things used to work, right? Okay, so if you have any doubt, you can comment down below, right? And I'll get back to you. And for any suggestion also, please give write down in the comments. Okay, thank you.